Scotland's coast keeps a harsh mistress. With 800 islands, it's a country married to the sea. Those who know it best fear it most. Fishermen know the risks.
We had to go into Castle Bay with 100 mile an hour wind, and that was fearsome.
I've seen the boat roll over on a beam end, so instead of you standing in the wheelers, you're actually almost standing in the window.
Even today, like with the boats going more power, they break wheelhouse windows and they can be 3 or 4 decks up. They still do damage if you didn't watch them. Like.
A lot of people drowned. In fact, whole boats are missing. You know, they do disappear in the bad storms. You know, if whole families, in fact.
Fishermen basically are hunters at the end of the day, and you go out there to make a living. We say it was always dangerous, but the parents was the ones that pushed the job hardest, which means you fish in the worst weather, you go to sea in the worst weather, and you stay out longest in the worst weather. But your crew got the most money.
In the 18th century, a ship's captain had a spyglass and a compass, but no radar or radio link, no way of knowing where the rocks were once the weather worsened. It was perilous.
Long ago, when I was a boy, it was just a compass and just like a little flash echo sounder, and that was all it was. That was all they had got.
The sea has always been perilously fair.
I think everybody will be happy as regards seeing a lighthouse. You're coming in the poor night and what have you, you're glad once you see the light, you know you're getting closer.
Very few purpose-built lighthouses existed before 1786. A few isolated beacons, stone towers fed with damp coal, had been built, such as on the Isle of May in 1636. However, the warning light was unclear and its visibility limited. The great storms of 1782 ravaged Scotland's merchant shipping. Trade was badly affected. Lives were being lost. Something had to be done. In Westminster, a Scottish MP, George Dempster, pushed for a body to be set up to oversee the building of warning lights at key sites around the Scottish coast. Such was the need for these beacons that the bill was on the statute books within a month, and the Northern Lighthouse Trust was born. This organisation eventually became what we now call the Northern Lighthouse Board. The year 1786 was a pivotal one. Within 16 months of its inception, the Northern Lighthouse Board and its engineer Thomas Smith had designed and overseen the construction of the lighthouse here at Kinnaird Head. 3 other key lights were to follow: North Ronaldsay, Eland Glass and the Mull of Kintyre. The Trust appointed a retired sea captain, James Park, as its keeper on a wage of 1 shilling per night plus free lodgings. James Park also had the right to graze a cow on the land outside the castle. The creation of the Northern Lighthouse Board was a triumph of Scottish practicality, administration and technical innovation. In Thomas Smith, the NLB had found an innovator who designed and built lighthouses and formed the basis for the working structure of the lighthouse service for the next 200 years. This brass box was owned by Thomas Smith, the first engineer to the Northern Lighthouse Board. It is engraved with his name and the date 1790 and is flanked by 2 lighthouses. Smith trained initially as a tinsmith, and it may be that he used it to store tobacco. The Stevenson family is intimately connected with the story of lighthouse engineering, but its most famous member was Robert Louis Stevenson, author of Treasure Island and Kidnapped. The family were the principal architects of lighthouses for 5 generations, building the 68 manned lighthouses constructed by the Northern Lighthouse Board between 1786 and 1886. The dynasty's links with the Northern Lighthouse Board began with its first engineer, Thomas Smith. Following in Smith's footsteps was Robert Stevenson. Robert was Smith's apprentice, partner and his stepson. Smith married Stevenson's mother, tightening the ties between the 2 families. Robert Stevenson's contribution was enormous. He masterminded the construction of the Bell Rock Lighthouse, one of the greatest feats of engineering of the 19th century. A staunch Christian, Robert Stevenson, like many Scots of his generation, kept his own Bible. Printed in 1793, this object has annotations by Stevenson and the Reverend Dr. Brunton, an Edinburgh minister with whom he was known to have consulted on spiritual matters. It contains a number of specially written prayers for those men working on the Bell Rock Lighthouse, Stevenson's masterpiece. These flags were made by Robert's wife, Jane Stevenson, in 1820. The large one was also used in religious ceremonies along with the Bible. Made from wool, the flags depict the Bell Rock Light itself, as well as images of ships and St Andrew. As well as being outstanding and dedicated engineers, the Stevensons were all accomplished penmen. Written between 1850 and 1851, this diary details all Alan Stevenson's exploits in that year. The diary also contains references to the Great Exhibition and mentions that Alan Stevenson met Prince Albert at the event. It also demonstrates the high level of detail that Stevenson recorded when on visits to new sites and to existing lighthouses. An inspection tour of Scotland's lighthouses could take weeks to complete, often in treacherous conditions. Like the Stevensons, Jim Oliver grew up steeped in the history of Scotland's lighthouses.
Well, actually, I was drawn into the lighthouse service having been a lightkeeper's son. My father was in the lighthouse service for a number of years. When I came out of the Navy, of course, it was sort of natural that you followed in his footsteps, knowing the type of life that I was going into. Well, in 1965, out in Glass Island, I was getting about £50 a month money. But on top of that, you had a free house, a rent-free house. You had your 3.5 tonne of coal per year. You had your paraffin lamp, or your fuel for your paraffin lamps, or where necessary or where available, you had electricity. So you had all that free. You had a furnished house, you had uniforms, you had bedding, you had all that sort of thing, which was part of your wages.
Like his colleague Jim Oliver, Duncan McIntosh served as a lighthouse keeper at Kinnaird Head.
I was 24 years old when I joined the lighthouse service. I was on Tarbert Ness Lighthouse, which is a shore-based station. It is the highest lighthouse on the Scottish mainland, and if I remember right, it's about 183 feet high. Now, I was up there in a severe storm, and you could actually feel the lighthouse moving.
The lightkeepers had their hand in almost everything you could mention. We had knitters, we had the people embroidering, we had the people making clothes.
But many lightkeepers did many things. Some would actually make things out of sailcloth and make things out of ropes. Some would turn wood, make little wooden bowls.
Try anything. Pipers were a bit of a nuisance.
Discipline was very much like a service discipline, but not so harsh.
Well, the worst offence was to let the light stand. Now that is, let the machinery run down and the light come to a standstill. It was a worse offence than having the light out. Because if your light was completely out, there's nobody could see it, there's nobody could mistake it, there's nobody could navigate by it. But if your light was, say, standing stationary, then some ship could think, oh, well, that's such and such a lighthouse, and they take a bearing and set a course and maybe steam up a beach. Now, the machine is purely clockwork, and there is a big weight going down the centre of the tower, and that weight on its descent from the top to the bottom keeps the machinery going for 30 minutes. We take a light from the heater and we just pass that up and onto the mantle.
Well, you wouldn't have managed without the lights, you see. You just wouldn't have managed, no. Every light had a certain amount of seconds between the flashes, you know, and you just navigating and such, whatever, going south or east, you know, or whatever.
Lighthouses were your navigation system, and all your trade went round the coast in safety during the darkness due to lighthouses.
When we was close to the shore, we used lighthouses all the time. Within the range of the lights, that's what we did. And you could tell, seeing the lights, if it light you was off and if it position you was with a compass. So it was really good, like.
All lighthouses are a great thing to ship in. Okay, everybody's got radars, but they're not fail-proof. It's just an aid to navigation, but that is there steady. And you know, if you see the light flashing, and you count the flashes in the seconds, you know exactly. You take a look at an almanac, you know exactly where you are.
Well, we knew that the guy was there making sure the sequence of the light was right, so we knew it was the right light. That was the main thing, maintaining the light to do its job.
Lighthouses could not operate without an intricate support network. The supply vessels of the Northern Lighthouse Board, such as the Polestar, the Pharos and the Hesperus, have traditionally provided this. These ships were continually plying the seas around the coasts, bringing food, water and other essentials to isolated rock stations such as Skerryvore. The skill of the ship's boatmen, able to land supplies in very rough seas, is often underestimated in the modern age. In the 1950s, all of this changed with the introduction of the helicopter. A versatile aircraft with the ability to lift heavy weights changed the way in which lighthouses could be managed, and they have remained part of the main lighthouse transport network ever since. Even so, operating helicopters in stormy seas has its risks, and there have been some accidents in the history of their use. In 2002, a helicopter crashed off the Broch of Bursay lighthouse while carrying out its duties. And earlier, in 1955, an RAF helicopter actually crashed into the Bell Rock lighthouse, killing all the crew. Despite these tragedies, the helicopter can perform duties that would be inconceivable from a boat, landing heavy equipment and supplies in places with difficult access. Its versatility has made it an essential tool for the NLB. Automation saw the phasing out of manned stations. A way of life dedicated to saving lives went with it.
When the station was automated, the keepers were withdrawn and they were put into, if you want to call it, a manpower pool, and they would use you for other things. But like fishermen and mariners, I don't think initially they really wanted to accept automation.
Nowadays you have lights flashing. There's nobody there.
210 years since it was built, Kinnaird Head, the first of the NLB's lighthouses, is now home to the Museum of Scottish Lighthouses.
The museum here at least brings to light the work that was done by these men that served these lines.
The museum is one of the leading lighthouse museums in the world. As Kinnaird Head led the way in 1787, so it does today. The Northern Lighthouse Board is still very active.
Now we've automated all our lighthouses, both here and in the Isle of Man. The shift therefore was moved from the traditional view of the NLB, which is lighthouses, to the future. A mixture of lighthouses, buoys and beacons, the traditional ACE navigation, into the future, which is radio navigation. AIS, the Automatic Identification System, it's currently a system whereby all ships above a certain tonnage, 300 gross tons, must carry this kit on board the ship all around the world. It transmits automatically the ship's identification, its course, its speed, what it's carrying, where it's coming from, where it's going to, and that information is available to authorities around the world. We're now going to use that technology ourselves to provide a system of ACE navigation using the AIS system. We can mark a wreck instantly, virtually, with AIS, and then as soon as we can, mark it physically with real wreck buoys. So we see AIS as the future, the immediate future. There'll be more beyond that, of course, as technology increases, but that is our current way we're moving ahead with technology. But we have to conform to an international standard of availability of all our category lights and lit buoys. This is set by the International Association of Lighthouse Authorities worldwide. And for our Category 1 lighthouses, the main lighthouses, it's at 99.8% availability throughout the year, and we do meet those targets, and indeed we exceed them.